Minister, you've been warned for years about the crisis in the Defence Forces and the fact that the announcement came from RACO General Secretary recently that despite all the hype of your recruitment campaign, we've had a net gain of 3 personnel in 2017, despite the so-called trumpeted recruitment campaign. And unless you address pay and conditions, this crisis is going to continue. So what we're asking is, what are you going to do about it? I don't want to hear about the Public Service Pay Commission. We've heard that. You've got to acknowledge the situation is getting worse, and what are you going to do about it?
Thank you. Minister.
Thank you very much, Deputy. In 2017, expenditure relating to the publicity and advertising of various recruitment campaigns amount to approximately 457,000. This figure of 15 million, referenced by the Deputy, is, I presume, a figure that was previously reported by the media as a saving that could be made by the retention of existing personnel rather than recruiting new personnel. This figure was provided by military authorities as an estimate of the cost of training personnel to replace similar numbers of those who left voluntarily in 2016. There is a significant scope for misinterpreting such estimates. The majority of that estimate cost is the pay of personnel being trained and their training staff. However, I must point out that if the personnel being replaced by trainees had not left, their salary costs would still be incurred. As such, such costs would have been incurred in any event. In addition, there has always been a requirement to train recruits and to have instructors to do so. I am advised by military authorities that as of the 31st of December 2017, 751 personnel were inducted into the Defence Forces, 742 exited the organisation. Of 742 discharges, 209 were accounted by personnel who left before they completed their initial training, mainly general service recruits. The long-run average for turnover in general service recruits training is 22%, and in 2017 it was 28%. Focusing on retention of trained personnel in 2017, 533 trained personnel left the Permanent Defence Forces. This compares to a long-run average departure rate of approximately 500 trained personnel. Additionally, the 2017 discharge rate of just over 8% must be viewed against all overall average departure of 6.3% since 2002, with a peak of 8.58% in 2012. The issue of turnover in military organisations is complex, having regard to the range of specialities and internal training dynamic. The impact of turnover can vary dependent on the functional area and the ability to regenerate capacity.
Deputy.
There's none so blind as those who cannot see. Minister, your response is basically trying to tell me that, sure, look, there's no problem here at all, it's only normal. There is a crisis here, and even the figures that you gave would indicate that there are a huge number of skilled personnel for whom to get to that level of experience costs a lot of public money, leaving our defence forces. That's a fact. And they're leaving in greater numbers than they were before. And the reason for that is not just pay, it's also the crazy conditions that they are expected to work in. We have a quote here from a fellow just back on a deployment from Operation Sophia, where he talks about working a 12-hour day at sea, now 7 days a week, with 2 or 3 24-hour duties thrown in for that amount of hours. I do about 80 hours a week for an extra 125 hours per week on top of my €435. That's €560 for a 40-hour week with 40 hours overtime. These are conditions that could be addressed to save experienced, qualified staff who are being put up to endure long commutes on low pay. It's absolutely disgraceful. These are the reason why many of these people are leaving. And if you continue to try and justify it and say, Asher, it isn't really a big deal anyway, there would have been costs there, then the problem is going to perpetuate itself as it has done, and you will be responsible for that.
Well, Deputy, you're the person that said don't bring pay into it, and then you bring pay into it yourself, so I have to address the pay issue. Yes, absolutely, I've stated on numerous occasions we have challenges, and that is why the Public Service Pay Commission are looking at issues in and around Defence Forces recruitment and retention. And it is a matter, and I'd hopefully have this addressed in the next short while. Also, Deputy, let me say that you're going to have retirements every year. People retire for very different reasons. Absolutely, maybe it is the conditions. It could be absolutely, and there has been retirements year on year on year, and you have to have new people, new blood coming in to the organisation, and of course that is going to cost a huge amount of money within the organisation to train new recruits and to pay the trainers and everything like that. That has always been the case, will continue to be the case, and that is about a healthy organisation. But we have challenges about the turnover at this time, and you were the person that raised the issue in around pay, and that issue has been addressed, and I hopefully will have the recommendations from the Public Service Pay Commission shortly that government can then recommend and can put into
This
train.
is not a normal situation whereby there's a crisis because people are leaving due to retirement. And for you to actually get up here and say that is actually shocking, because that's not the reason why it's there. There was a report in early March that numbers in the Defence Forces had dropped below 8,500 for the first time. The establishment level of Defence Forces is 9,500, so we're 1,000 below minimum. Not only that, but we're losing experienced, trained people who are being replaced by new recruits, which takes time and money to get them to the same level of expertise. Now, what I said was it wasn't just about pay. It's not just about pay. And your excuse up to now was, oh, you couldn't deal with that because the Public Service Pay Commission was dealing with that and you hoped it would be sorted soon. What I'm trying to say is there are a whole number of other issues around the conditions of Defence Forces personnel which are driving them out, which you have control over and which you could address, not least the long hours, not least the fact that you could stir to implement the European Court of Justice 2010 ruling on working time, which was ruled out of order. It's been subdued, to say. We know that, for example, issues like Larium and other issues that the Defence Forces have disrespected their staff on so greatly, the Air Corps and so on. You could address these conditions that would say that you at least respect the men and women who are party to our Defence Force, and pay is only one part of that.
Just to say that the Working Time Directive Deputy is being worked upon, and we have people from both the Defence and the Department side working on this issue with the representative organisations. I have stressed previously I want this sorted out. I want my officials to sort it out. I want the DF military management to sort it out. And there is a point of truth that we have to come to on this issue, and I'm wanting it sorted out as soon as possible. You spoke about somebody having to do 12-hour shifts at sea or whatever. Well, this is normal naval service life. That people do serve maybe a week, 2 weeks out at sea, right? You don't come home every evening and dock the ship. You don't. But let me say, Deputy. Okay. Let me say, you don't. A naval vessel doesn't come back into Cove every or into Hull Bowl and back in the evening to let it off and start off the next morning again. Sea life is difficult. I recognise that, and that is one of the issues within the Pay Commission that I'm wanting the Pay Commission to recognise. I hope they recognise it. That these people do put in long hours. I recognise that, and I understand the frustrations of some people in the naval service, but it is in the hands of the Pay Commission, and I hope that the Pay Commission recognise the frustrations of members of the naval service, of the Defence Forces, that we can then take on the recommendations from the Pay Commission.